Hey, well, come back to my channel to this video. Quiet evening, when Oliver arrived at his grandfather's house, the large old mansion sat at the edge of the countryside, surrounded by tall trees that swayed with the evening breeze. Oliver always loved visiting his grandfather, a kind but mysterious old man who told the most fascinating stories. However, there was one rule he'd always been told since he was a little boy: never go near the locked room at the end of the hallway. Oliver had always wondered what was behind that door. Why was it locked? What was so special about it? He had asked his grandfather many times, but the old man only shook his head and said, "Some doors are locked for a reason, my boy. Best not to be curious about things you don't understand." One night, after dinner, Oliver lay awake in bed, unable to sleep. The house was silent, except for the faint ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. His curiosity about the locked room grew stronger. What could be inside? Maybe just an empty, dusty old room. Maybe something far more interesting. Slowly, Oliver slid out of bed, careful not to make a sound. He tiptoed down the hallway, his heartbeat quickening with every step. The wooden floor creaked under his feet, but he pressed on. As he reached the end of the hallway, he found himself standing in front of the forbidden door. It was an old, heavy wooden door with iron hinges, and in the center was a small keyhole. His fingers hovered over the handle, but he knew it was locked. There was only one way to see what was inside. He had to look through the keyhole. Taking a deep breath, Oliver bent down and pressed his eye against the tiny opening. At first, he could see nothing but darkness, but as his vision adjusted, he saw something. The man stood in the middle of the dimly lit room, his back turned to the door. His body was completely still, his shoulders stiff, as if frozen in time. The faint glow of a red light surrounded him, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Oliver felt his breath catch in his throat. Who was this man? Why was he just standing there unmoving? He watched for a few seconds, expecting the man to turn around, to move, to do anything, but he did not. The longer Oliver stared, the colder the air around him seemed to become. Then, just as he was about to step back, the man twitched. It was only a small movement, but Oliver saw it. His breath quickened. Then, without warning, the man spoke in a deep, eerie whisper. "I see you." Oliver stumbled backward, heart pounding. Had the man really just said that? How could he have seen him through the keyhole? He gasped for breath and looked at the door again. He wanted to run, to pretend none of this had happened, but his feet felt frozen in place. Then, suddenly, a shadow passed over the keyhole from the other side. That was enough for Oliver. He turned and ran, his bare feet slapping against the wooden floor as he raced down the hall. He didn't stop until he reached his grandfather's study. "Grandpa! Grandpa!" he shouted, bursting into the room. His grandfather, sitting in his armchair with a cup of tea, looked up, startled by Oliver's panic-stricken face. "Oliver, what on earth is the matter?" his grandfather asked. Oliver struggled to catch his breath. The locked room. I looked inside. It was a man. He saw me, Grandpa. He spoke to me." At that moment, something strange happened. His grandfather's face, usually warm and kind, turned pale. He set his teacup down carefully and stared at Oliver, with eyes full of something that looked like both fear and sadness. After a long silence, he sighed deeply. "Oh, Oliver," he murmured, "you shouldn't have done that." Oliver swallowed hard. "Who is he, Grandpa? Who's in that room?" His grandfather leaned back in his chair, as if gathering the strength to tell a story he'd never wanted to share. Dim light in the study cast shadows over his face, making him look older than ever. "That room," he said slowly, "has been locked for more than 50 years. For good reason." Oliver's stomach twisted. 50 years? But I saw him. He was there. He was real. His grandfather nodded, his expression grave. "Yes, I know. You see, Oliver was once a man, stayed in that room. He was a traveler, a stranger, who came on knocking on our door one stormy night, seeking shelter. Father, great-grandfather, let him stay in that lethal room. The next morning," his voice trailed off. Oliver leaned in, his heart racing. What happened? His grandfather's eyes darkened. He was gone, vanished. His belongings were still there. Bed was untouched. There was no sign of him, except for one thing. Oliver swallowed. Was it? His grandfather's voice dropped to a whisper. Single red light, glowing in the center of the room. Shiver ran down Oliver's spine. "That doesn't explain who I saw." His grandfather took a deep breath. "You saw what everyone who has ever peeked through that keyhole has seen. The same figure. The same man." To Oliver, there is no man in that room, only a presence. A spirit, trapped in that space. Watching, waiting. Oliver's breath hitched. Waiting for what? His grandfather's gaze met his, unblinking, for someone foolish enough to open the door. At that moment, a sudden creaking sound echoed from the hallway. Both Oliver and his grandfather turned their heads sharply toward the sound. The house was supposed to be empty. Door to the forbidden room was locked, wasn't it? Oliver's skin prickled. Grandpa, what if the door isn't locked anymore? His grandfather stood up, his face grim. And we must never go near it again. From down the dark hallway, through the silence of the house, came a soft, whispering voice. I see you. What do you think Oliver really saw? Was it a ghost? A lost soul? Or something much worse? Let us know in the comments. Like and subscribe for more spooky stories. And remember, some doors should never be opened.